Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 24th episode of A QISSAA with Ishika, quintessential and inspiring stories of South Asian artists, funded by the California Arts Council Individual Artist Fellow Grant. My name is Ishika Mochal, and I'm coming to you from the unceded ancestral lands of the Gabrielino Tongva people, also known as Los Angeles, California. I am beyond thrilled to introduce to you my guest today, photographer Simrah Farrukh. Based between Los Angeles and San Francisco, her images are a reflection of the delicate yet compelling ways in which she views the world. Her work explores how identity and community intersect with fashion and beauty to form a narrative. Inspired by the elegance, grace, and intimacy of Pakistani poetry and her Muslim upbringing, Simrah hopes to create softness in an otherwise antagonistic world. She has worked with numerous companies like Hypebae, Elle Magazine, Disney, Netflix, Canva, Beats by Dre, Vogue India, the New York Times, the LA Times, San Francisco Chronicle, and the Intersectional Environmentalist. And she's also showcased her work at numerous solo and group exhibitions across the West Coast. She has been featured in press by Vogue India, the Daily Bruin, Vice, Adobe, Byrdie, 35s and 45s, Sunstroke Magazine, Timid Magazine, HomeGrown, Brown Girl Magazine, and Azeema. I am so beyond honored to welcome Simrah. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so let's just start with what was your first interaction with the arts, especially like photography?
Yeah, I feel like my dad is a lover of the arts and he's really into like Pakistani poetry, literature, art.
Mhm.
And growing up, I kind of just was immersed into that and he kind of encouraged it. There's a lot of artists in my family, I'd say, but not everybody pursued it. I think me and my cousins are like the first generation in our family to kind of go and pursue that.
Okay.
So yeah, just growing up, it was always around me, and I was always just like drawing in the corner at like, you know, Brown events.
Yeah.
I'd just be like at my own table just drawing, and everybody would be like, wow, like you're so talented. And it was just like a doodle. But I think that also kind of encouraged me to like express my artistic side growing up.
Right. Very cool. And you have talked about in some of the interviews I've read of yours that photography being a tool of remembrance and storytelling. So, can you talk more about why you feel that way and what motivated you to pursue photography as like a full-time career?
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like this period of time, obviously, photography isn't too old, but it's not too new. But at the same time, there's not many South Asian photographers in history that we can like look back at. It's more so painters, drawers, sculptors.
Hmm.
So I feel like me and the generation of photographers now are kind of the first to be documenting this point of time of the South Asian community.
Hmm.
So I feel like it's whenever I'm capturing moments, it's kind of like documenting parts of history in a
Yeah.
sense. And yeah, I kind of chose photography. I kind of just had a camera in my hand because I'd always see like just people at weddings just like taking photos and they'd just be like wedding guests, but
Right.
they'd be like older than me. And they'd just be taking pictures of their friends, and that kind of interested me.
Hmm.
At the same time, my dad and mom would take a lot of photos and like home videos with like an old camcorder when I was growing up.
Right.
So I think those influences kind of got me interested in photography. And then at the same time, I took a trip to Pakistan with my mom, and we were visiting my grandma after my grandfather passed away, and we were going through like an archive of family photos from when both of my grandmothers were growing up, my
Hmm.
parents growing up, their weddings, things like that. And I think there were so many people in my family that were in those photos that I hadn't met because they passed away before I was born. But
Right.
from those images, I could tell a lot about them, and that showed me the power of photography and image making.
Right.
And that's, I think that's what my college essay was about, like to get into college. I
Mhm.
kind of made it based around that. And yeah, that's how I decided that I would pursue photography full time.
Yeah, very cool. I love what you said about like this idea that there were Indian artists, like visual artists, but there weren't that many photographers to like document our community as a person of the community because otherwise it's so easy to like have like this colonizer lens when you're photographing people of
Mhm.
color or like just like brown people. So it's so important that you chose to do this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So can you take us behind the scenes of what a day would look like for you on a shoot from like your process of conceptualizing to shooting, editing, selecting, publishing?
Yeah, so whenever I'm doing a shoot, I typically, well, first I set up, I get to the location, I set up, and if it's like a studio shoot, then there's more setup than usual. Otherwise, I like shooting just out in the open, out in nature,
Mhm.
outdoors. And I kind of get to know whoever I'm photographing a little bit more just so that there's
Mhm.
that like trust between me and whoever I'm capturing and or taking a photo of, and also just creating like a nice calm energy
Right.
so that they can be their true authentic selves.
Mhm.
Um, and from there, sometimes I have like a specific shot list of what I want to capture, and other times it's more spontaneous and I just have a general idea and kind of let my creativity flow in the moment.
Sure.
Um, and from there, we kind of just go through the images, get whatever we need, play around a little bit, test out any different shots, and experiment. And it really depends if it's like for a client or if it's for my
Right.
personal project. If it's for a client, then there's more of a structure. And
Mhm.
then if it's more of a project for myself, then it's like less structure, but still like having a general idea of what I'm going for.
Mhm.
Um, after that, after the shoot, I usually go back and I don't look at the images right away. I kind of give myself like a day or
Mhm.
two, which might seem like a short amount of time for some people, but for me, that's how long it takes. And then I kind of go through selects from there. And when I'm selecting images, I try to find the strongest image that represents the thesis or meaning I'm trying to get across.
Mhm.
And I kind of, after I make a body of selects, then I kind of look at them like all together in a gallery view to see if the entire series tells a story and if it
Mhm.
flows, if everything goes together and is, um, yeah, just complementing each other, I guess.
Right.
And after that, I go ahead and start editing my images. And I think up until recently, my editing had been more heavy-handed, meaning I would put in a lot of editing, but now
Right.
I'm enjoying kind of more the simplicity of it and not so much adding too many edits where it looks like it's just a filter on it.
Got you.
Um, and after that, the images are done and I send them off wherever they need to be sent, or I keep them hidden until I'm ready to release them or until more of that project is done being
Mhm.
shot. And
Yeah.
then I release it all together.
Very cool. I want to ask you more about the concepts that you choose. I know that a lot of your work is rooted in heritage and culture, and you've talked about finding a balance between honoring that and critiquing that. So, Can you just talk more about that idea and what inspires you to create the content that you create?
Yeah. So when I started photography when I was 14, but when I got into college, that's kind of when I started to do photo shoots around being South Asian.
Mhm.
But I think at that point in time, looking back at it now, I feel like I was romanticizing the culture a little bit. And then
Mhm.
I soon realized that while I was in college and wanted to go deeper into themes and topics than it just being like a photo of a girl with a t-shirt
Right.
wearing a lehenga and wearing like sneakers with it, because at that time that to me was like groundbreaking,
Mm.
but it doesn't really have any depth to it.
Mm.
um it could have depth to it, but at the time it was literally just a photo, like a pretty photo.
Right.
um and I felt like me romanticizing the culture would be irresponsible because I was also growing a platform. My Instagram was kind of growing at the time,
Yeah.
and it just felt wrong to say that our cultures, I want to say cultures since not all South Asian cultures are the same. So,
Of course.
yeah, not our cultures are not perfect, and
Mhm.
they shouldn't be put on a pedestal. There are a lot of topics that we need to work on and
Mhm.
unlearn a lot of mindsets and ideologies. And as I was growing, I feel like I grew with my work and with the concepts that I was speaking on. Um, and yeah, so as I grew older, the concepts kind of became more about like womanhood and togetherness and
Mhm.
community. Um, yeah, and just talking a lot about the nuances of being a woman, being a South Asian woman, being a Muslim woman. And that's kind of, yeah, how it went from there.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you about, like when you look at your work, it looks like you're seeing a lot of brown women in a very like empowered state, or just like a natural empowered, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, so can you just talk about more why you specifically focus on women and women of color?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just touching on like the femininity within me. Everyone has like a masculine side and then a feminine side, and um, I feel like it's so easy to touch on the masculine energy of being a South Asian woman
Mhm.
because of like having to feel like you have to step up and like step up to a certain role if you're like an only daughter of the family, or if you're the oldest daughter of a family,
Right.
and all these responsibilities you feel like you have to just take on. And there's also like a lot of more like anger that like builds up from like intergenerational trauma and things like
Mhm.
that. And I feel like photographing women kind of puts me in tune with my femininity, and it
Mhm.
brings me back to just being gentle and
Mm.
elegant, but at the same time keeping that strength within me, and
Right.
knowing that, like my bio says, you can be strong while still being soft and
Right.
leading with compassion and gentleness and love.
Yeah.
Um, and I also just love the idea of women coming together and celebrating whatever it is, or just like lounging together, hanging
Yeah.
out together. In a lot of Indian miniature portraiture
Mhm.
from the past, there are a lot of images of just women doing different things. Like there will be
Yeah.
a like a queen and her like the women that live with her in her compartment of the palace. They're like brushing her hair and helping her
Right.
get ready. Or there's like paintings of them like all dancing together.
Mhm.
And I've just really been inspired about from those images of just women just being together and having a non-judgmental kind of aspect about it. So
Yeah. Yeah, like I love that. I so much of Indian culture is just like honoring the sense of community that resides within femininity and the
mhm.
female presence. So that's really cool. Um, you touched a little bit on the idea of like social justice and using art as a like a vessel of change and highlighting issues that need to be changed. So can you talk more about where your passion for that comes from and what you hope to use your art as a means of creating change? Like how do you see yourself doing that?
Yeah. Um, I think that passion just comes from me being just a very compassionate person and someone who I'm a person that's more on like the observational, introverted, quiet side.
Mm,
So and growing up when I was little, I was pretty quiet, so I just observed a lot and could feel different people's emotions and
mhm, mhm.
like I'd be like 6 and if I see someone like giving a speech and they start crying, then like I
Right.
would start crying. So
Mhm.
I feel like it's partly that. And then also, again, I feel like as an artist, there's just a responsibility that you have to talk about social justice and things that are happening around the
Absolutely.
world. Um, because your brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than it does like textual information. So
Wow.
I feel like even like scientifically, art has such a power and it's just part of the responsibility of being an artist. Not
Mhm.
saying that every artist has to like have that. Like sometimes it can get tiring for people of color, Black, Indigenous communities who are artists to constantly be making work about their identity and about their
Right.
culture. And sometimes you just want to like make art
Yeah.
for just the sake of making art.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's a balance of all of that.
Okay. Yeah. That's beautiful. I have always like thought about art being like art shapes culture, culture shapes society. So
Mhm.
especially like with the influence and impact of visual imagery, that number is crazy. That they
Yeah.
can process 60,000 times. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of like social justice, I know that you've worked with the intersectional environmentalists in a different capacity, but can you just share how you got involved with that and what that process was like?
Mhm. Yeah. So they were they had internship applications open and it was like for video editing. So I
Okay.
just applied and got onto the team. And through that, it was interesting to be working with people that were in kind of the same social justice space, but in a
Right.
different capacity because it was more specific to environmentalism.
Hmm.
Even though there's like intersections, like
Of
it,
course.
like the title says, intersectional environmentalist. Um, so yeah, there I was editing their videos
Mhm.
and putting together photo projects, and it yeah, it kind of opened up my perspective more and I got to learn a lot more about environmental issues and how
Mhm.
again that intersects with literally our everyday lives. Like in so many ways it can intersect with being South Asian.
Right.
And then it intersects greatly with South Asian, like the South Asian region in itself,
Right.
since we have many environmental issues going on there.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I've met a lot of people through that, and they've also amplified my work because that's part of their org is to just amplify different artists, people of
Yeah.
color, again, Black, Indigenous. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was it was a fun experience.
Yeah, that's great. I just asked that because we recently had them come to speak at our college, and I know a bunch of my friends and I really enjoyed listening to them speak. So when I saw that you had worked with them, I was like, little fangirl moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so who are the people that you look up to and have been inspired by?
Yeah, there I feel like I could name like a whole list of people, but I'd say right now I'm mostly inspired by so some photographers are Yumna Alarashi, then Carlota Guerrero, Nadine Ijuire, and probably right now, because I'm doing a project on her. Right now, it's my dado, my grandma,
Mhm.
because she just has like so many stories. And again, I'm doing a project on her, so she's
Right.
been my muse for the past few months. So
Yeah.
yeah, like a mix of photographers who are doing incredible things right
Mhm.
now, and then people personal to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And continuing on this line of people that you work with, how do you find your collaborators? For example, like the people that you shoot with, the people that you photograph, and the designers of your sets, etc. How do you find the people that you work with?
Yeah, so I think something that I prioritize and something that I like the number one thing I look for is if people align with the project that
Mhm.
I have going on. If it's a personal project,
Right.
like if it's a commercial or like a client kind of project, then that process looks different. But
Of course.
when it comes to my art and my projects that I'm creating by myself, it's yeah, typically starts with whoever aligns with it first and foremost, because if you believe in the concept, then you're going to be more passionate to put in your best foot forward and your best work into it.
Hmm.
And that's really important to me. And I think, yeah, that's probably the number one thing I look for. And then if they like have any ideas, then I'm open to
Hmm.
hearing how their ideas can inform the concept itself.
Right.
And I typically find people through, so I was with an agency earlier in the Bay Area, and they had a lot of different stylists, makeup artists,
Hmm.
people like that. So I found them that way. And then also just through Instagram and just like putting out a call, like looking for like a set designer or something like that, then a
Right.
lot of people will reach out to me, which is great.
Yeah. And so that's for like for your personal projects. And what is that process like for when you're shooting with, say, like for Netflix or Vogue India?
Yeah. So for things like that, then it typically, sometimes the client will already have someone in mind, or again, it's like with agencies, you kind of just find them through agencies and reach
Right.
out and kind of work with them that way.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. And what is that like on set process like? Like how much, I guess, creative freedom do you have? What how is like the collaboration of the vision? How does that work?
Yeah. So again, for like more commercial or editorial clients, it looks a little different because there's already like a general creative in mind that the
Hmm.
client has.
Right.
Um, so again, that looks different because you kind of just show up and go by whatever the
Hmm.
creative deck looks like.
Yeah.
But for my personal projects, it's kind of knowing their portfolio, like a hair stylist portfolio, for example. I'll see
Right.
like what they can do and what their specialty is. And
Hmm.
for example, I just did a shoot I don't think I released. It's on my website, but
Okay.
I really wanted I wanted the model to have like a really long braid.
Hmm.
And it was important to me to find someone that knew how to work with like hair extensions and could do a braid like that. So I would look through people's portfolios and see if they have that in their books or if
Mhm.
they are comfortable doing that.
Right.
And if they can, then that's great. And then I'll work with them. And then basically, their skills kind of help to collaborate with the concept because
Mhm.
they, when you know what they're capable of, then like there's like endless possibilities kind of.
Oh,
So it
yeah.
kind of works like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like pooling the talent.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I know that you've talked a lot about your photography work and that's your dominant medium, but I know that you do a little bit of video work as well, like shooting short films and music videos. So can you talk about that process and how is it similar or different to still photo?
Yeah. I feel like it's a little different, but generally the same. I think I approach my um, process for film or video the same way I approach photography in the sense where I'm essentially I'm just doing photography, but I'm just adding movement to it and motion
Gotcha.
to it.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the process starts with kind of just like a concept I have. And then, or if it's like a music video, then I'll kind of listen to the song, listen to the artist and what they kind of imagine, and then
Hmm.
go from there and build up a story,
Hmm.
scene by scene, and pull together references and like maybe a color palette or a lighting. And yeah, I've shot a couple of music videos, and for the most part, like we have a general idea and then we just go out and shoot it.
Yeah,
And that's always exciting, like spontaneous decisions, creative decisions.
right.
It's it kind of helps, but then also in the process when you're compiling all the clips together and actually editing the video, then you kind of have to like pull a story, like pull different clips to make a story.
Right.
And if you don't have like a general idea of what you want that story to be, then it can get confusing. So
Hmm.
I think having more of a structure to that helps a lot. But yeah, I think my films and my stills kind of have like a similar energy and, you know, cinematic look to them. So
Sure. Yeah. I want to go back to what you said about like this idea of like having to be flexible with what could happen on set. I recently went to a master class that was like, you can plan as much as you want to, but what's going to happen when you're actually doing the do is it's so fluid and like that
mhm.
ability to improvise and just like go with the flow is so important. So just wanted to
Yeah, I agree.
echo what you said. Yeah. Yeah, I wanna shift to a little bit more about, like, culture and, identity and representation, because that's a big reason why I started this show is just to honor the fact that we have so many South Asian artists who have made such a big impact or are about to make such a big impact in the arts world, and I wanted to ask you, have you ever felt a need to change your identity or the style of your work so that you could get work in the industry or to fit in? And what was that process like if you did?
Yeah, I think that's a big thing that I'm still trying to figure out right now
Mm,
is how do I balance my personal work with my commercial work?
mhm,
Um, I think for a long time, I tried to box myself into either or.
mhm,
And when it comes to commercial work, obviously there's like a larger audience that goes beyond the South Asian communities
right.
that you have to kind of approach. And like, so there's obviously just the South Asian body of work isn't going to be sufficient for commercial work because it's more personal to me and it's more artistic, and the way I approach my personal work has a more artistic approach rather than
Right.
a commercial approach. So when I graduated in 2020, so over the past almost 3.5 years, I've been trying to just build my portfolio to have a balance of both so that people
Right.
know that I am an artist that does work on South Asian communities, but then I'm also a photographer who enjoys doing commercial work and working with different clients
Mhm.
with my own personal touch because I'm not just like a Pakistani Muslim artist.
Right.
I'm not just Pakistani Muslim, I'm an art like and there's intersections
Of
to your
course.
identity. So yeah, I think finding that balance has been a big thing for me currently, and it's something I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to something that you said earlier, I think so many artists of color, like you said, feel that like not burden of representation, but they're kind of like expected after a certain point to just like do art about their identity. And that's not all that there is to being an artist of color, like you said. Like one could be an artist, not just like a Pakistani artist or an Indian artist or whatever. Yeah. So that's important
Yeah,
for like general audiences to recognize as well.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So you talked in the beginning about how there are not a lot of Indian photographers. So, how have you dealt with, I guess, the lack of representation around you in your field? And if you've ever felt like people stereotyped you into certain work? Or,
Yeah. Um, I think, well, I wanted just to start by saying that, like, even when I would have like portfolio reviews or share my work with industry people and kind of just introducing myself, getting my name out there, um, I have been told that like my work is too niche and I need
mm,
to expand it.
mm,
And what that kind of was more when I graduated in 2020. And at the time, my body of work was mostly around South Asian. It was mostly personal work.
mm,
And I think it was important for me to expand my work because, again, like I'm not just a South Asian person, I'm more
right,
than that. Um, so I did expand my work because my commercial work is still like an extension of me. It's extension of who I am, and the
right,
inspirations that come from that are from my identity and how I see the world, things like that. Um, so yeah, I've been told that my work is too niche,
mm,
and that kind of set me back a little bit because it kind of made me angry that my like because my personal work is around my identity,
mhm,
it's me. It kind of made me angry that essentially what they were saying is that your work isn't relevant and
mm,
your identity is too niche, like being Pakistani is too niche, being Muslim is too niche. And
mm,
then it like asks the question, well, why is it that like my identity is too niche in America?
right,
And then it kind of relates back to like whiteness and all of that, which is like a whole other
yeah.
topic and realm. Um, I think I kind of went off the question a little bit and I kind of forgot the question.
No, it's okay. I just talking about like the lack of representation and stereotyping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I've been told that my work is too niche, but then after that, I kind of started getting work that was kind of around being South Asian. So the Netflix shoot, I got to shoot Maitreyi Ramakrishnan from Never Have I Ever, and I was asked to shoot the Miss Marvel red carpet for Disney last year, last summer. So yeah, it's it's kind of confusing. It's like one on one hand you're being told something and then on the other you're being told something else and then it
Right.
kind of just you're like, okay, so then what is it? Like how do I do this?
Yeah.
Um so yeah, again, I'm only 3 years out of college, so I'm still figuring out and navigating through everything, but
Mhm.
I'm hoping to have clearer answers when I get there.
For sure. It's all a process. And like you're saying, it's probably such a big struggle. I don't know, struggle, but like a process to find that balance between fighting for your identity, but also not wanting to pigeonhole yourself. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because
yeah,
I think boxing myself into just being a South Asian artist and making work just around being South Asian, like realistically in this world, in this economy, that's not going to like provide me with financial sustenance. So, but at the same time, like don't mind going out of that South Asian path because again, like I'm more than South Asian, being South
of
Asian.
course.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's like a fun part of any something dash American person is like, how do you explore and honor both of your identities without
Mhm.
like making one I don't know what I'm saying, but like you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, I
Like
get it.
how do you honor both parts of who you are? Yeah.
Yeah.
If if this was like a magic show and you had the power to create any change within the industry, broadly as in like entertainment media industry and also specifically within photography, in terms of diversifying the art and the media that we're creating, what changes would you like to see happen? And how do you think that in an ideal world, the medium of photography can help with that?
Yeah. So this is like just in general, like not just within the South Asian
Yeah,
kind
just
of.
broadly within the visual arts, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like so far I've been asked to photograph projects for clients because of their diversity, equity, inclusion programs.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden that kind of stopped. And I've heard that a lot, even within like other communities, like within the Black community, a
mm,
lot of Black photographers and Black artists, they have noticed like a pitfall in
mm.
not getting work because everything kind of a lot of companies kind of hyped up their DEI
Right,
plans and campaigns during the protests in 2020, and
right.
now 3 years later, it's kind of down, dying down and fading out, and a lot of people are like, "So you
Mm.
only wanted us for your
For the check mark.
yeah for the
Yeah.
check mark." So I feel like I honestly don't know what steps that would look like,
Mm.
but sometimes being boxed into like a DEI campaign can feel like you're just being hired for a check mark.
Right,
So I feel like implementing that without boxing it into a DEI
right,
kind of term would be helpful and kind of just hiring people for the sake of hiring them because they have strong work and a strong
right.
voice rather than for their identity. Um, yeah, I feel like that would probably be something that I'd like to see change. And in photography, I think it's important to get to know the photographer beyond their work. I think that gives like that human connection
Mm.
with the client and the photographer, um, rather than just being like, oh yeah, like you take this image really well, like we want
Right.
to hire you. Kind of like get to know the photographer and know the reasoning behind their work and like what makes them passionate and things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Touching on the DEI thing you said, I've thought about that process, like that question myself so many times. And I'm sure that like that's such a big cause of imposter syndrome within like artists of color who are hired. And I'm like, I we don't know why we were hired. Like, were we hired because we're talented? And I'm not at all to discount that the fact that like these people who are hired are talented, but it's just it's like a mind game when you are attached to a project. It's like, why did you hire me? Because of this or because of this? Yeah. It reminds me, I'm just gonna like derail for like 2 seconds. This I was in a class about Indigenous arts and like the progression of that over the past like century. And there was this like big thing in 1992 because it was like the 500 years at 500. I can do math. Yeah, 500 years after 1492, and it was this big movement of like Indigenous artists being like, "Are you going to remember me in 1993 as well, or do you just want me right now because it's in?" Yeah. So what you're saying just made me think of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like sometimes they are just trying to hire you because it's a trend almost. It's like what the best thing to do for your company right now is to hire a brown person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So fun. So interesting. But regardless of that, you have worked with so many incredible companies already and done so many really inspiring personal projects that I have looked up to and really enjoy like watching your work. So I wanted to ask you, what does success look like to you, and is there a specific project that you have worked on so far that has been like one of the most meaningful to you?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the definition of success to me, I'm trying to change because to me, success, like, it, I feel like I'm not at that point I want to be at yet where I can say, like,
Mm,
oh, yeah, I'm very successful. But then
right.
as I've been doing like a lot of personal healing work,
Mm,
I'm trying to remind myself that like the point at where I am right now, it's like that one quote or that like one saying where it's like where you are right now is what you prayed for like 5 years
mm,
ago. And
yeah.
that's something that you really wanted. So that's kind of something I'm trying to tell myself constantly is just because I'm not like working for these specific companies that I really want to work with, or
Right.
because I'm not may not be reaching like this amount of like monthly income or something.
Mhm.
It like all of that doesn't mean that I'm not successful. Like where I am right now is success. Like I'm doing it, so that's
Yeah.
successful to me. So yeah, I'm doing a lot of learning and unlearning um, to kind of just help me appreciate and accept where I'm at right now in my journey and in my process, which
Mhm.
I feel like was a lot of like that's kind of the answer for like a lot of the more career-based questions that we've had in this interview. I think
Of course.
it's like something that not a lot of people talk about, especially like post grad.
Right.
I still consider myself post grad because it's
Yeah.
only been 3 years. So, like that time in your life and what you're going through with your career and like your personal identity, I feel like no one talks about it. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's why I'm confused. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
It like what accomplishments or what projects have you worked on so far
Yeah.
that I guess have like a deep meaning for you?
Yeah. Um, I think the one I'm working on right now, I mentioned it earlier, is with my dado, my grandma.
Right.
I think it's just so personal to me, and this is the most time she's usually in Pakistan, but she's been visiting us here
Mhm.
for the past 2 years. So this is the most time. And the last time I spent this much time was with her was when I was like maybe 18,
Mhm.
and your mindset and your priorities and what you appreciate is very different when you're a teenager compared to now. I'm turning 26 in 2 months. So
Okay.
I'm just more appreciative of the people in my family, the women in my family, and
Right.
I've spent so much time with her taking her to like her doctor appointments and just sitting with her, spending time with her. I'm the only freelancer in the family, so my schedule is very flexible while everybody else is like out working. So I give her company and just talk to her about her life. And in talking to her, I've realized that I really want to document these stories. So I've just been working on a project where I interviewed her a little bit, and then I'm slowly just whenever she has the energy, me and her just go out into the backyard or something and take photos, or I like take some video for the film that I'm going to be working on her. And yeah, this project just seems very like it feels like the most in-depth project I've done to date, and it's obviously very personal. So I think that whether this project is like seen in like galleries or if it's literally just seen amongst my family, like either way, I feel very proud of that project and I'm very happy with it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I'm so glad you have like the ability to interact with her and just kind of document and learn about her life.
Mhm.
I'm excited to see it if it gets released publicly.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for aspiring photographers and especially those of South Asian descent?
I would say I would say to like on one hand, like I've mentioned this so many times already, but on one hand, again, I feel like in the past, I felt like I'm not where I want to be yet, so I've never felt like I could give people advice. But at the same time, I know that I've had a lot of accomplishments and that's something that I should be proud of. So in that sense, with but that would be an advice is to be proud of all your accomplishments, even if you don't see it as being the one accomplishment, like the
Right.
big break or whatever. And then in terms of like getting your work out there and getting noticed, I think finding your finding your thing within the South Asian community or the South Asian art community or within the commercial industry, like whatever it is, just find what makes you and your work you and
Yeah.
original because that is the thing that's going to make you stand out. Like everyone says it, it's very cliche, but it's like the truth. And I was skeptical of that in the beginning when I just graduated and I had to like start expanding my body of work and trying different things out. I was skeptical because I felt like all these companies were hiring people because their work was like in trends and they were following like a certain style. And so that's what I tried. I tried doing some shoots where it was for a specific company and it would match the company style, but those
Right.
photos did not feel like me at all.
Hmm.
And I feel like looking at those photos, they would just get drowned in a sea of other photos. Whereas if I had intended that project or that shoot to be around, like center around my style, then it would definitely like stand out and potentially like get their attention more. So
Yeah.
yeah, just staying true and authentic to
Yeah.
yourself, I think.
Yeah, like finding your artistic voice. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. So this show is called A QISSAA with Ishika, and QISSAA means episode. So is there an influential episode or QISSAA from your life that has been really impactful on your journey as a person or as an artist?
Yeah, I think right now it's just the episode. Like there's a lot of growing and changing and again, a lot of learning and unlearning,
Mhm.
accepting. Um, and I like sometimes it can feel like it's very hard, but I know that like what I'm going like this journey that's happening right now for me is going to be very influential for like me in like a year or two. So
Right.
I'm just kind of going with it and accepting it and taking it day by day in this industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say my kid says right now.
Yeah. Nice. Nice. Well, 5, 10 years down the road, I will come back to it and ask you the same question. And I guess maybe you'll mention this period. We'll see.
Yeah.
So you talked about the project you're working on with your grandma, but do you have any other upcoming projects that you are at liberty to share with us? Or any recent projects?
I think the one with my grandma is probably the biggest one that I'm focusing on right now. In the past, I focused on like multiple projects at once,
Mhm.
and like I'm a good multitasker, but I feel like when these all these projects have so much depth and emotion to it, like doing multiple at once can get tricky, and you don't want to like mix anything up or put more into one than the other when all of them are kind of like equally as important to you. So
Yeah.
right now, I'm just working on the one with my grandma.
Nice, nice. That's really important to hear as someone who tries to multitask a little too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And where can people find your work?
Yeah, my Instagram is my full name, Simrah Farrukh, and then my website, my portfolio is my full name, www.simrahfarrukh.com.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story and your artistic voice and your projects with us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you, everyone who tuned in for watching. I hope you were inspired by this. And if you know anyone who might be interested in Simra's story or just a fellow budding artist, feel free to share with them. And also, our next Kissa is next Sunday, November 5th, with Zara Fuzzle, who is a voiceover artist. So I hope you can tune in for that too. All right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.